Okay, back with the second part of the demoralised slave, as to, I guess, explain in some more detail how this looks in real day life, everyday life, I guess, the ways you can identify a slave colony. I mean, I obviously did it before, but the individual effect, I guess the effect to the individual probably is another way to put it, of one who belongs to a slave colony, who's born in captivity, doesn't know any other way to be. It's like the bird who lives in a cage, looking out the window and seeing another bird flying, feeling pity, and possibly a bit of animosity towards that one who dares to, show some other way of existing. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at here. So we're going to continue with that now. A man who lacks purpose distracts himself with pleasure. So you're going to see more about this a little later on, but this really defines what I said earlier about the teenagers. Well, how many adults do the same thing, right? Boys' weekend away, it's all about getting pleasure, right? Same thing with the girls' night out. It's all about getting some pleasure, right? But if people really were attached to purpose, pleasure would be a thing that just happens when you're actually working in alignment with that which is going to uplift all of life, not just something for you individually. That's the way where you get true satisfaction and pleasure. But that is so far removed from the consciousness of one who's born in captivity. This, what you've got here, is the most, highest aspiration for overwhelming majority. This is just obviously showing you something that looks unpleasant, but you can insert any kind of compulsion in here, and it's no different. Right? It's just not your particular brand if you're not connecting with this, but you'll have your brand of this kind of same compulsion, no matter who you are. You look at how many freedom fighters, or people who call themselves freedom fighters, you look at their profile pictures, and there'll be a picture of a motorbike or a car or some sporting thing, you know what I mean? All these material attachments, right? What's that? Right? Is that the highest aspiration of existence? To identify yourself with something material? That's now a measure of your self-worth, right? This is how it works, right? And these people think that they're enlightened, because they can see some elements and levels of slavery, but they can't see how they're actually one of the drivers of it by the things that they attach to, and they're being coached into drawing some value out of this through experience, right? And they think, oh no, I'm free to choose. I've got control of myself. Not even close. All right, so we're going to move on, and this is what I was talking about earlier, about how to really see how you're born in a prison, how it's all purposefully designed, and unless you're willing to take a proper look, this is where you're going to remain. And then the sad part is you're going to leave everyone else who can see it. You're going to be responsible for why they're stuck in there too.
10 insights will summarize your life. I will speak slowly, so your mind and your soul will understand. Number 1, you were born in a cold prison. It is your country, your state. Number 2, you have to pay for the prison stay. They call the prison fee taxes. Number 3, you have no say what will be done with the money, but you have to pay. Number 4, to pay the money you have to work. The prison encourages you to buy new shiny products, so you feel better about your poor existence. Number 5, you are not allowed to exit the prison and live on your own. They will hunt you and make you pay. Number 6, only a few prisoners have walked far enough to see the prison wall. Number 7, the prison gives you news and entertainment so that you don't discover the prison walls. Number 8, the prison does not allow strong family bonds or strong brotherhood unless you are a part of the group that is running the prison. Number 9, the prison you live in wants you weak, sick and divided, because weak prisoners can't climb the walls. And most important, number 10, the prison is mostly run by other prisoners. It will collapse if enough prisoners will wake up. Go your way, Bratan. Reunite with others Find the walls. Climb the walls. Every fucking day. This is the Grim Hustle. Be honorable.
So there you have it, guys. I love that one. That's so full and so rich. So this is Aldous Huxley quote, but before I get into that, I just want to talk about that whole thing about scaling the prison walls, right? What I'm giving you here is showing you the walls. It's whether you want to see it, and pretty much every video I've done up until this point has been about showing you the prison walls. Sadly, as I'm into it, over 160 videos, very few people who have come to watch this content I put out have been able to make that connection. That's what it's ultimately about. It's about showing you the wall, and do you care enough to actually take action, right? To understand it, embody it, and then take the action that's going to tear down that wall. And if you're still stuck to these material attachments, it's not going to happen. Because at some point, you're going to be left to, well, which one do I care for more? The comfort I get from my attachments, or detaching from that and actually taking control of my life? Or I'm going to say, well, what can I do about it? I'm just one. All that kind of stuff, right? That's that little, the mind trick that's been played on you. That's how you know you've got a virus, is you actually can't get to that place where you can see any other version of reality other than we're all screwed. You know, we're all going down the hole. People can't unite. You know, people are all fractured, yada yada. You don't have a vision for that. And if you're in that space, that means the mind virus is working perfectly. All right, the perfect dictatorship would have the appearance of a democracy, but would basically be a prison without walls in which the prisoners would not even dream of escaping. It would essentially be a system of slavery where through consumption and entertainment, the slaves would love their servitudes. Think about how much time and attention gets given to sport. That's one of the massivest ones. You know, if you want to see slavery in action, just watch how many males attach to sport, any version of it, right? And what do they draw from it? It's about one being better than another and glorifying that dominance, right? That superiority. That's all slave think right there. Okay, so we're going to move on to what happens to the mind of a prisoner who accepts their prison and then fights to keep it going, right? So a police officer, military is the classic of that, right? What's got to happen in their mind for this to be something that they actually champion and attach to? So let's take a look. Solipsism, the ideology that one's own mind is sure to exist. Solipsists contend that knowledge of anything outside one's own mind is unsure. Hence, there is no such thing as objective truth, and nothing about the external world and its workings can actually be known. That's all the New Age thinking comes from that kind of idea. So all the New Age religions that come out there, all the stuff that sounds very fairy, you know, all wonderful and fluffy that so many people are attached to, right? It's all attached to this one idea. And how many people go, you know, how many people do you hear that, I don't need to care about that, that doesn't affect me? You know, that whole disconnection from how life really works, because their mind doesn't believe it. So if my mind doesn't believe it, it doesn't exist. So they're the things we really need to be mindful of, right? It's about really being able to understand how the control works, how deep it runs. This is the calling for every single individual to care enough about understanding how the control structure really works. And then if you understand it, it's not enough just for you to know it. The next requirement, once you understand it, is to teach it, is to live it, right? And now, how many people actually are doing that? That's the biggest failure here, is the lack of will to actually teach it and live it. All right, let's move on. This is a ripper of a video. I love this one.
You know, you go on the street, everybody knows slavery is wrong, but we only deem it wrong because the degree of which was so blatant and obvious. But in principle, slavery has never actually vanished. The degree has only been reduced to a less obvious predicament, if you will. And herein lies the key to understanding the very principle of slavery. In slavery, it doesn't require continuous physical violence to slaves being kept on a cotton field, on a plantation, for instance. They were forced around, and the the slaves were not like forced around and whipped with a cat o' nine tails incessantly. What it does require is continuous duress. Duress is the state where beings are being kept in a continual threat of violence. People are being threatened with violence if they do not conform with the wishes of the master. So as long as they comply, no one is being harmed. So you are free to do as you're told. And in our situation, it appears as if people are free, but the dynamic is the same exact dynamic is taking place. You are free within the boundary conditions of authority as long as you don't start to question it. Now, authority over another being is slavery under duress. During the era when people with dark skin tones were held as slaves, it was readily observable that people were slaves. However, today it isn't necessarily readily observable that violence will be done unto you unless you continue to conform to the wishes of authority figures. And as we just established what our rightful and rudimentary property is in life, this is not the natural state of reality as it is supposed to be. It isn't. We aren't supposed to live according to the whims of another being whom is not less or is not more isn't more valuable than ourselves, I should say, because we own our body, we own our free will, and we own the fruits of our own intrinsic and rightfully acquired physical mediums of exchange. And that is why people have always sensed that something was wrong about this system. There was always this something gnawing at them. Intuitively, people have always been struck by this sense of dissatisfaction. And this isn't because people are inherently grateful, as the system often promulgates, as we'll talk about later, but people have been convinced that there is no problem in it. And instead of following that which they sense, they continue to live their lives casually inside of the boundaries of this system that they are living within. And, you know, as soon as those gates, you could call them, of what you are free and able to do within the system, creep in more and more and more. At one time, you're free to do this, and the next time it's a crime, which is what we've experienced over the last couple of years. There is less room for you to do as you please because you have less room inside of this, the boundary conditions that are imposed onto you compared to the last time. And what that is when people essentially started seeing things clearly to an extent after these couple of years, and are being somewhat active in its mitigation, but not in its total abolition. I compare that to going from like 2 whips a day to 7 whips a day. And what many people want is to just go back to 2 whips a day instead of 7, because 7 is just too painful. But to say no whips is where we should point our attention at if we are to change the world condition. What I want to get to is why people are yet so amenable, why people acquiesce to this condition of not having proper ownership over what you actually own. And everybody who is honest with themselves knows that if you choose to show resentment or dissidence against the face of authority, like governments and etc., violence will be done unto you. They will trespass, they will introduce themselves, they will welcome themselves into your home, they will assault you, confine you, and ultimately murder you if the resentment shows itself to be uncontrollable, which also reveals itself to be a very appropriate term, actually. Violence, as in violation. They are violating your right to your own property. All things that we all have no right to do, as we all agreed upon earlier, because we all have the same rights. Yet some people magically possess the right to do the very things that are actually harmful deeds. Why? What makes these people so special? and in truth, nothing does. They aren't called authorities for no reason. Authority contains the word author, so the writer of a scribble. And they write down scribbles, they make things up. And there is no fixedness to them. They are wholeheartedly arbitrary and are dependent on nothing more than the individual whims and people who believe in them. They are not based on true morality, like we've discussed before, not transgressing upon people's right to their own freedom, the right to decide over their own body, their own choices, etc., living in harmony with one another. Yet the very essence of a government is nothing but the aforementioned violations. They do not come along and make voluntary suggestions for you to consider with your judgments, addressing your take on the situation, trying to give you your stance on the situation. They make demands, and one cannot choose to demur or refuse such a demand, lest incurring violent outcomes. And that's all they do. And vast amounts of people comply because they don't want to have any violence done unto them. And, of course, this is the mindset that one has to, quote unquote, that one has the quote unquote moral obligation to comply, unless you're a bad person or you're a criminal. And this is all that waylays the total abolition of slavery. And the reason why abolition has eluded humanity has to do with manipulation, obviously. And I'm not the first and the last to state this, obviously. But allow me to clarify what I mean by that, by, manipulation as the culprit, as the main culprit. Manipulation has to do with the psyche, as many would agree. If it wasn't for the ego, then we wouldn't actually understand their own sovereignty and the fact that nobody can control you and reign over you according to their own individual whims, but that you govern yourself and you are your own leader. That's its purpose, to prevent us from limiting ourselves within the boundaries of collective thinking, of collectivism, thinking that the group is more important than the individual. It is protecting our uniqueness. The understanding and the acknowledgement of our uniqueness is from whence all our unthinkable capabilities, if you will, that's where they bear fruit. Beyond a fear of being disapproved by the rest, because many people eventually start to look for approval. Now, the ego helps to remind you that you don't need anyone else's approval. That is why culture and institutionalized ostensible religions condemn it. Because it doesn't want you to express your uniqueness so that you understand that you're not bound by limits. And you can achieve everything you wish to acquire, everything that you aspire to. They want you to conform. They want you to always look to the approval of the herd, so that a few people can more easily control the many, and so that you can become more predictable instead. Because they fear what you can become ultimately, because they know what you're capable of achieving. And if that expresses itself, their control system would absolutely perish. Authority is the ultimate conceit. It lays people low lest they believe that it is they and not the law which has value. Like Jeremy Locke, the writer of The End of All Evil, lavishly put it. And pride is an understanding of your worth. Culture condemns it in order to suggest that you are really not of sufficient value to do, say, or accomplish things that you desire, like freedom and understanding your worth and the things that you want beyond the limitations of privileges within the system. The slave masters and their henchmen couldn't possibly enslave such a large number of people if the people didn't believe that they were rightful slaves and property of other people, that they had a moral obligation to obey someone else's decrees over their own life. that their own property was also someone else's property, and they could decide what you can do with it and take it away from you if you don't conform to their own will. There were these surely if people know the works of Frederick Douglass, there were these ideas during the epoch of slavery that postulated that you steal yourself from the master if you wanted to be free, and that you were too prideful and too arrogant and egotistic if you ever wanted to be free. If you ever wanted to steal yourself from the master, imagine that.
Okay, so there's plenty of quality content in there, plus the slides. So I highly recommend, if you're serious about learning, that you actually pause, go back to where those slides are, and either take screenshots or just read them over again, because there's critical stuff bound in those slides that they've put through this video. And then the last slide they've had is all the different names out there, and see how many of those names you've ever heard of, and then ask yourself why. Right? So all this knowledge has been concealed for a reason, but it's still out there, and you have the capacity to discover it if you care to learn, to know, to understand what's required to live free. The other thing is, what's your vision of what it means to live free as well? Because that doesn't ever get discussed. And until that starts coming out and more people start speaking out about that, how are people going to know what actions to take? So, unless you can see a vision for what actually living free really looks like, right down to the minutiae of how you would function with other people in your community. What would be the way that a free man or free woman, how would they associate with one another? If you don't have a vision for that, how can you action it? Now, what I've got here is I just happen to, I don't know how this keeps working, but things just keep showing up in my feeds. And this is a screenshot I took from a video that was just really welcome. Anyway, these are sections out of the Talmud. I'm pretty sure it was the Talmud that was this was coming from. And I'm only going to read the last three. And where the word Jew is, or Israel, I'm going to insert the word government. And then let's see if you can make a connection with the foundational idea that's still running today, that started thousands of years ago. So you can really see that there's nothing new here. This is all being concealed. That's the difference. But it's always been there, and it still is to this day. And until you can see it for what it is, you're going to keep getting sucked in, thinking that there's some kind of benevolence out there that's going to come and save you, right? No, it's you who's going to need to understand and care to want to understand how wicked and sinister the human conscience, I can't even say that correct right now, can become if it's infected with a poison, right? And that needs to come from experience. And so if we're given a harsh upbringing, and most of these Satanists are, then we are going to act out that trauma and keep perpetuating that harshness. So the people who come up with this, right, you can only imagine what kind of harshness they grew up with. So let's read the fourth one down the list, actually. Actually, I might start with the third one down the list. If a goy kills a goy, or a, let's call it government, he is responsible. So any agent of government, right, if you kill them, you are responsible. And if you kill someone else, right? But if government kills an everyday individual, which they're calling a goy, a non-Jew, non-government agent, so let's say police officer, he is not responsible. Now, how many police officers get to do murder in broad daylight and then hide behind the legal system, right? Same with the military, right? If a government, so a Jew, is permitted to rape, cheat, and perjure himself, so let's say government is allowed to do that, any agent that works for government, that's protected by the inner sanctum, but he must take care that he is not found out, so that government may not suffer. Think about that. Now, you think about the Royal Commission that everyone's talking about, into child trafficking, yada yada. I don't think it's a Royal Commission. What am I talking about? That stuff that came out by Heffernan, right? What did they do? They all closed ranks. That's just a perfect example when he exposed the kind of violations that have been happening to children by the judiciary. So all agents of government, people that are in that inner sanctum, they've just been running amok. and it's going unchecked and it's out of control, and then everything went silent, right? So they all closed ranks, right? Next one, a government may rob a goy, which is just the everyday individual, right? That is, he may cheat him in a bill. Think about all the bills we get. If unlikely to be perceived by him. So as long as you can't figure out that you're being cheated, that justifies why government can keep violating you by making you pay these bills and enforcing it. Right? As long as you fall for whatever, they don't care whether it's coercion, they're not interested. Right? As long as you keep paying, that means that's what you want. See, the foundational idea is exactly the same. It's just who's doing it. So this is all about power. Who chooses to use their power to violate life. That's all what sits behind it. No matter what the institution is, it's still that sick poison that infects the mind. And the last one. All property of other nations belong to the, let's call it government nation, so that institution of government, which consequently is entitled to seize upon it without any scruples. You ringing any bells yet? And orthodox, so let's just call it government again, is not bound to observe principles of morality. So if you're in the inner sanctum of that cabal that conceals itself in those institutions, whether it's the WF, whether it's the Bank of International Settlements, whether it's the Club of Rome, whether it's the Tavistock industry, what did I just call the industry? Institute. Whoops. That was pretty funny. You choose whatever one, whether it's the European Union, the UN, whatever structure is set up, right? That's the inner sanctum. And so you are not bound to the principles of morality. They acknowledge that there is such a thing. Or other tribes, right? Morality towards people or other tribes. So anything that's seen as foreign, that the inner sanctum disidentifies with, it's open slather. And they don't believe that they're actually responsible for what they do now. Right? They give themselves a free pass. This is the sickness. He may act contrary to morality, if profitable to himself or other government agents in general. There you have it right there. That foundational idea still runs hot today. So while everyone's there, most people sit there thinking it's just Jews. No, it's not. That's just an idea. And it's an idea that's poisoned the mind. And it's the sickness that if we as individuals who do not operate at this level do not lift a finger to stand against it, then we are giving permission to it. It's just that simple. And if you don't stand against it in a way that's actually got to do with foundational truth, not using that fake legal system and all their statutes, and if you're using that, you are just feeding the machine, right? If you're not standing from that position of moral conscience, the way the laws of the universe actually operate, and keep speaking that out, that truth, with power, that you understand how the laws work and what the consequences are, no matter what rituals and voodoos they perceive they can bypass these laws, that you are not letting them out of it, right? You are letting them know this is a violation of the code of life. And you cannot insulate yourself from the inner turmoil that's coming to you, the reckoning that you are building for yourself. There's nothing that can stop that. There's no army, there's no coalition of ignorance that can stand in the way of that. That is coming to you. You cannot extinguish that. You start speaking like that, and you start teaching other people how to speak like that. That's where the true power is going to become, because eventually they're going to get that rattled. The more voices that keep saying that, they've got nowhere to hide. Right now, they've got plenty of places to hide because the overwhelming majority of people are letting it happen. They're conspiring with it. And until that stops, this is going to keep happening. I'm hoping this is starting to come across now. If we don't understand this, this is what we're going to remain as, right? We can see it with chickens, right? You've got the free range and the caged. Everyone knows that the overt slavery, the chattel slavery, that's the identification of slavery. But then look below. We are the free range slaves, right? The most effective form of slavery is a system that allows just enough autonomy to give the illusion of freedom. That's the trick. While keeping the public in a perpetual state of indentured servitude. And if we don't start speaking the way where the truth actually exists, this condition will not change. And every single one of you who's listening to this has that power to use your voice. The voice is one of the most effective tools that exists that can actually change someone else's capacity and awareness if you use it in a way that actually is connected to that which is self-evident and verifiable. And if you use it for any other way, you're going to be perceived as mad. And it doesn't matter whether someone's going to accept what you say. The truth is the truth, and that's where your power is. And unless you speak it, you are siding with the lie, whether you like it or not. That's not a choice you get. All right, so now if you're serious and you're looking for what specific actions can actually help, this is Will Keat. I strongly recommend looking him up. You'll see him, he does interviews with Neil Oliver, and he's got his own channel now, which is Common Law Constitution, I believe, on YouTube. So I highly recommend watching this, and he'll explain what the true nature of the law is and how it's connected to natural law.
The Constitution existed before that as a set of ideas. It's a set of principles, which is exactly what you just said. That's what it is. And people get sort of a little bit disappointed and say, oh, you mean it's not written down? Well, it is written down, actually. It's not codified. But the principles by which we should live, which is the Articles of Common Law, so coming right back to where we started, the Articles of Common Law in the Constitution, in the 1215 Magna Carta, which is not all of it, by the way, it's just parts of it, are constitutional principles that were written down that agree with natural justice. They agree with the things that you've just talked about. Basically agreeing with having a community based on individual rights and individualism. And that's the power of the English Constitution, is that most constitutions don't do that. The difference of a common law-based constitution or a democratic constitution, if you understand the true meaning of the word democracy, is that it is in alignment with natural justice, and it is in alignment with elevating the individual within society, not the collective. Yeah. And that's why the English Constitution is the magic that it is, and people need to grasp it and realise actually it's about something much deeper than the Constitution. You know, the Constitution's great, you know, but all the things that we've talked about today, natural law, consciousness, shadow work, those are the really important things. But the lovely thing about the Constitution is that it gets you there. It's like a shortcut. It's not even a shortcut. It's beyond that as well. But it's like a template for taking all of those fundamentals and saying, right, well, here's a way that you can organize yourselves and govern yourselves in a way that gets you there, gets you where you want to be. And really, in a way, it's actually the only solution that I think has ever existed in a man-made form that leads you towards those ideologies and philosophies that we've talked about today. Yeah.
So there you have it, guys. Hopefully that's giving you a little bit more clarity. And so if you're at that point now where you're ready to act, like decisive, specific action, then what's being offered here is where, you know, it's been set up for you. There's a community waiting for you to join in. You know, they're holding the line. They're taking the hits. There isn't any glory in taking the hits. It's not about that. It's about standing up for that which is verifiable and self-evident, which your soul calls you to do. And so it's those people who have that strength of character to stay in the fight regardless of the hits they're taking. And we're just waiting for the numbers to show up. So if that's you, every single body counts. So hopefully this is where you're going to find your, I guess, your strength to know that you're not alone in it. So anyway, watch on. Okay, so if you're looking to find some kind of guidance about moral principle, and that there is actually a structure in place that was built on moral principle, where the system of governance, which just means system of public servants and administration of how services will be delivered to the people equitably in order to advance the quality of all lives equally. This site has got plenty on it. I'm just going to quickly, I'm not going to go too much into it because I've done plenty of other videos about that. But here we go, it's already standing on principle. You can see that unifying our community. It talks about the 1901 Australia Crime Punishment Manifesto, which is the 1901 Commonwealth of Australia Constitution. So it talks about why that's a fraud and how that's just more enslavement. And then you've got participate in our police letter campaign. If you want to do that, you can click on that, take you right there, subscribe to the mailing list. As you go back up here, you can see all the different places you can look into. And so anyway, that's for you to discover in your own time, but just giving you a resource. It's magnacarta1215.com. There you go.